Extra time.
Completely changed the complexion of the campaign for different sides. So we waited, and in the end, we've settled on Tottenham Hotspur, who have endured an extremely bumpy season. Obviously, went into it coming off a Champions League final with one of the best regarded young managers in the world. Ended up parting ways with him when I think they were down in, was it 14th?
14th, yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, it's been an interesting half season under Jose Mourinho, but I'm not sure you would call it successful. What do you think, Diggs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly flattered them where they finished up. I mean, after that draw against Crystal Palace at the weekend, they ended up 6th, and I had loads of people tweeting me being like, see, Mourinho's done a great job, etc. We've got Europa League football for something like the 9th or 10th year in a row, as in European football for Spurs. But the fact remains that they were 7 points off the top 4, which was the same distance they were pre-lockdown. And they were as close to 11th place Southampton as they were to the top 4, really. And that 6th place, you know, it's not all Mourinho's fault. Obviously, they had a terrible start to the season, as you alluded to there. But that is their worst finish since 13-14, when they were under AVB and then Tim Sherwood with Agile came in, and that stupid salute to Adebayor. So, and in that year, they actually won 5 more points and won 5 more games and finished with 10 more points. So it just goes to show, like, the standards at the top of the Premier League, bar Liverpool really this year actually, were really quite poor. It was the lowest top 4 finish for ages, and Spurs in 6th was quite a mediocre tally. I mean, in previous years, their points tally would have finished in the last 5 7th, 8th, 9th and 8th. So really it did sort of flatter them. And people say, yes, they were 14th when Mourinho took over, but they were only 3 points off 5th place Sheffield United at the time. And actually his Premier League record with Spurs is pretty unremarkable, really. So they've played 25 games, they've won 13, lost 7, scored 43 and conceded 20. He has made the defence a fair bit better. They were conceding 1.4 goals against per game under Pochettino. That's dropped to 0.8. The attack has gone from 1.5 goals a game to 1.7. So there is signs of improvement. But he was brought in for this supposed winning mentality. And I think Spurs fans are already getting a little bit maybe jaded by what that means in terms of what they have to watch week in, week out. I think they have turned into one of the most boring sides to watch in the Premier League, judging on the games I saw them post-lockdown, bar that performance against Leicester, which I have to say was excellent. But, you know, he's brought in as a winner. They were already out of the EFL Cup, so you can't judge him on that. But they lost to Norwich on penalties in the EFL 5th round. In the FA Cup for 5th round. Then they got battered by Leipzig in the Champions League as well. And, you know, the green shoots of recovery were that they were 4th after he took over, but they were far from sort of their dynamic best that we saw under Pochettino. They really had regressed into a very counter-attack orientated side. And I think Spurs fans might be slightly concerned going into the summer because we've already heard about a lack of funds. But I mean, Pat, what did you make of it? Because we were quite against this appointment to begin with, really.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that at the beginning he did start to shore the defence up. But with Mourinho, we always say that there are trade-offs that come with his genuine managerial abilities. And in Spurs' case, I think it's become clear quite quickly that those trade-offs are going to be extremely costly. Having isolated Tanguy Ndombele and got it to a point where it seems like he is almost certain to leave if a decent offer comes in, that to me is a much bigger problem for Spurs over the next few years than it would have been if, I don't know, they tried to integrate him and maybe it'd cost them a couple of points. I think that it's strange to me as well that they talk about the lack of money there, the lack of money for recruitment, obviously, you know, the issues with the stadium, but they've handed Mourinho such an enormous contract.
Vast.
And you think at this stage of his career, he shouldn't be commanding that larger contract. Like, he was sitting unemployed. They could probably have said to him, we'll give you 10 million a year and you can take it or leave it. And instead they're paying his full quote, it seems, at 15 mil. And the one saving grace, I think, is that after the way he's left his last couple of clubs, and given Daniel Levy's general shrewdness, I imagine that they have breaks in his contract where they can fire him for a minimal cost. I think that's probably something that they've managed to insert, and maybe that's why they're paying so much in basic salary. But yeah, I just think that they've been not really much better than they were, and under Pochettino it looked like they pretty clearly quit on him. I think when he left they were 14th. They deserved to be 14th. They were playing worse than Arsenal were playing like a mid-table side at that point, and Spurs were playing like a 14th place side. Like that's how bad they were. That's really troubling. And when you look at expected points, expected goals for the end of the season, by expected goals they're 12th, by expected goals against they're 10th, by expected points they're 12th. This is a team who are there with Arsenal, among the kind of Brightons and Burnleys of the league, and that is absolutely staggering. And to be honest with you, that's given the fact that Harry Kane, after sitting out pretty much 6 months, finally looks fully fit. Like, Harry Kane came back absolutely flying after the restart. It looks like he's got the rest that he's needed for so long, and maybe now he can, recover full fitness and return to that level we saw from him in 2017. But if he hadn't come back like that, I think Spurs would have been in real trouble. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure what the plan is, to be honest. Since Mourinho's come in, it's interesting that they've still bought some young players. They brought in Bergwijn from the Eredivisie. They've brought in Jedson Fernandez. So it doesn't seem like he's coming in and immediately started trying to load the squad up with old timers, which is something that he has done at other clubs in the past. But I'm not really sure what kind of football they're going to want to play. I'm not really sure what their tactics are, given that in games against Bournemouth and Newcastle this season, they were muddying up the midfield in a way Mourinho used to do it against Barcelona and Manchester City. It's one thing to go away to a big side and say, we're going to play ugly football and get the win. It's another to say we're going to do that against relegation candidates. And I'm not sure that Spurs fans have gone through this long period of success and are now willing to say, well, you know what, it's winning football. I mean, for Mourinho to justify the way that he's played so far with this Tottenham side, I think they need to be very clearly a Champions League side and in contention for major trophies, and I don't think they're going to be. So it's quite hard to see how you're going to sell this to the fans, because at least, Arsenal and Chelsea, when things were going wrong, they could say, look, we're blooding our youngsters, we've got a manager who we believe is building something really exciting for the future. And if we're not good this year, then we think we will at least be good in 4 or 5 years. Is there anyone who thinks that Mourinho in 2 or 3 years is going to leave the team in a better place than he found it? I'm not really sure. I just think in a couple of years' time, they'll say, yeah, well, we're in basically the same place. We're kind of, 6th, 5th, 6th. And hopefully the next guy will do a better job.
And the squad will be a hell of a lot older as well. We're already seeing a sort of changing of the guard with Vertonghen leaving. Alderweireld won't be long as well. So that sort of bedrock of their defence, Lloris, will probably only have a couple more years. Danny Rose has already left as well. So there's certainly a lot of work to be done. And in terms of what they've got to play with this summer, I mean, the reports are already that Mourinho is saying that there's not much money at all, really. So, for this podcast, Pat, did you have an amount of money in mind that was your sort of transfer kitty? Because I was working with off the assumption that they wouldn't have any more than £60 million, and then they'd have to sell some assets, is what I sort of worked on.
I didn't really budget for the whole group of transfers so much as I tried to go for cheaper, feasible options. I mean, there are a couple of guys in there where I was thinking, if they sold this person or if X club came in for this person, maybe this is something they could look at in return. But to be honest with you, I think the idea of X club has a transfer kitty of X amount is always a little bit misleading. I think a lot of teams this summer are going to have less or more depending on what their owners think is prudent. If you've asked your players to take a pay cut, there might be clubs who say, well, actually, we could spend a bit, but we're not really going to because it will look really bad. And there might be other clubs who say, well, with teams being willing to sell for cut down prices this season, we're going to move some stuff around so we have a little bit more cash. But yeah, I'm assuming that they need to move on some assets. I just don't know who those assets are, because you don't really see people linked for many of their players, and the players who they are linked with are ones that Spurs aren't going to want to sell. Yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit troubling, to be honest with you. I mean, they could. I was just thinking when I looked at the numbers, I'd completely forgotten about Dele Alli.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a little part of me that thought, could they sell Dele Alli?
Oh, wow. That's not something that crossed my mind, but I suppose they potentially could.
I mean, I wouldn't, but he's one of the guys who would fetch them a hefty sum of cash, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at him, Kane, Son, really, as their main sort of money makers, and on Ndombele, obviously, as well. But I was sort of working off the assumption that if he's not in Mourinho's plans, it looks like that relationship has completely broken down. I think if you're Levy, I think you probably do sell Ndombele. Take 45 million if you can, and use that to reinvest in other areas of the squad, particularly with, defensive midfield, the whole of their defence pretty much needing work, and a backup striker needed. So, I mean, I'd look to sell Danny Rose for sure. Mm-hmm. Probably think about moving on either one of Lamela or Moussa Sissoko, although neither are going to fetch a lot of money in this market. So you might end up with sort of 120 million pounds to play with, was what I was sort of working off. But yeah, I wouldn't sell Dele Alli either, to be honest. And I feel like when he's fully fit and at his best, he's actually quite a Mourinho style of player. Like he can play in a number of positions. He's not too fussy. He's very physical. He can link up really well with Kane and play in that number 10 role effectively. So I wouldn't rush to sell Dele Alli by any stretch.
No, but my attitude is kind of like, if this guy isn't going to play, then you got to sell him. Like, it's kind of like Guendouzi at Arsenal. Though a much less valuable player. I mean, Guendouzi is somebody I want to keep at the club. He's extremely young, he's extremely promising, but you think if this guy's just going to sit on the bench and lose value, then why not at least try and sell them now? Like, if you don't think Dele Alli is good enough to be playing for your team week in, week out, then if somebody like Man United or Man City wants to offer you an ungodly sum for him, and that's going to allow you to rebuild your squad, then you've kind of got to do it. And if your theory is, well, actually no, he's really good and it's just that our manager is beefing with him and doesn't want to play him, then you think, well, then you should probably get rid of the manager. At some point here, you're losing money one way or another. You have to do something about that.
The only thing I think about is because Ali's stock has probably never really been that much lower than in the last 18 months. So the fee you'd get for him is a hell of a lot less than what you'd get in, say, 12 months if he had a really good campaign. Although then you'd be, thinking, why do you need to sell him? So it's quite a tricky one, because you want to get, if you're going to sell a player, particularly if you're Daniel Levy, he's notorious for this, you want to sell them at their true value. And I don't think you're going to get someone offering Dele Alli's true value this summer.
I don't know. I kind of agree with you in some ways, but also, yeah, if he's not going to play, then it's not going to make any difference. And you might think that it would be counteracted a little bit by the fact that he's homegrown if he were to go to another Premier League side. But yeah, I agree. You have the same issue with someone like Lacazette, right? Where the perception, I think he's been a lot better than the general perception suggests. But because that perception is that he's not had a very good season, if you try and sell him, you're not going to get what you'd want for him. So I kind of feel like you might as well keep him. But going on to the players that we're targeting.